Good morning. This past week we've been working with multi-step equations. Today I want to stop and do a brief review about working with adding and subtracting negative numbers. So behind me you will see I have a number chart. This might look familiar to some of you. In the center I have 0. Going to the right side of the graph, I have all my positive numbers, as we would normally count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. To the left, I have the negative numbers going back from 0, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Now, why do I have this graph up here? Well, it's going to be a helpful tool that I'm going to explain to you how we can use to work with adding and subtracting negative numbers. A lot of what I'm pulling from today is actually a video that I found online that I found very helpful, and I'm going to relay to you what I found in it. So, we know how we subtract and add numbers. If I put 1, if I do 1 plus 5, we know how to add that together. That's going to be 6. If I do 5 minus 1, that's also pretty straightforward. However, what happens if I do 1 minus 5? Well, then we know we're getting into our negative numbers. Again, what happens if we do 5 minus a -1? What do you do when you see 5 minus a -1? That's what this chart is designed to help with. This chart is going to work with a couple steps. So if I go back to our first example and I do 5 plus 1, no, that's not going to work on this graph. If I do 4 plus 1, what I would do is I'd come over on this graph. I'd say I'm starting at 4. I see the plus sign. And the plus sign is going to tell me that I'm going to look to the right side of the graph. That's very important on this graph. The plus side is always going to tell me that I go to the right. The minus side is always going to tell me that I go to the left. It's plus 1 or plus a positive 1. So because I'm working with a positive number, I'm going to go 1 over, and my answer would of course be 5. If I were to change things up here and do 4 minus 1, as I said, we start with 4, but because we're doing minus now, we want to look this way, which is pretty straightforward. You add, you move up, you subtract, you go down. One little trick here is because I'm subtracting a positive 1. That tells me to go forward in whatever direction I'm looking. So right now, because I'm subtracting, I'm looking to the left. I'm subtracting positive 1, so I'm going to go forward 1. And that's, of course, going to give me 3. One more basic example on that point. We'll do 3 minus 2. Start out at 3 minus, so I'm going left. And this is not a -2, this is a positive 2. 3 minus a positive 2. So because it's a positive 2, I go in whatever direction the arrow is pointing. 1, 2, 1. So that's all very simple and straightforward. But what do I do with a problem like 2 minus 5? This is where this chart becomes a little bit more useful, because I start out at 2. As we said, I'm subtracting, so I go left. And then I know that it's a positive 5 because I don't have a negative sign in front of it. So I move in the direction of the arrow, and then I can go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That tells me that I get a negative 3. I can also say 2 minus 3 minus, so I'm going left. That gives me, and then 3, this is going to be a positive 3. 1, 2, 3. It's going to give me negative 1. Okay, so now let's amplify this a little bit more. What do I do if I have 2 minus a negative 1? This is where this chart really comes in handy. So, again, we're starting with 2. I have a negative, I'm subtracting, so I go left. But then I have this negative. So with if it was a positive number, I would move in the direction of the arrow. Since it's a negative number, I move away from the arrow. I move backwards from the arrow. So 2 minus 1 minus a negative, 2 minus a negative 1. So I look left, I step back 1, and that gives me 3. Another example. I'm going to make it even trickier. Negative 1. Nope, I'm not going to do that yet. 1 minus negative 3. So I'm going to go ahead and mark off 1 because it's minus. I look left. Because it is a negative number, I move away from the arrow. Arrow's pointing left. I'm going to move right because it's a negative number. So I go count back 1, 2, 3. And you can see that this becomes 4. Working with this chart, one thing that you can see is generally when you have a number minus a negative number, you actually want to add that number instead of subtracting it. Okay. So now what I want y'all to do today is I want you to try. I'm going to write down a couple of problems, and I want you to use this chart to try to answer these questions. You may copy it down on a piece of paper, you may use it on this video, whatever works best for you. But I'm going to have you do 3 minus negative 2. That'll be question 1. One minus negative 3. Oh, that's awful. 3. Question 3 is going to be 3 minus negative 1. And then question 4, just to remember what we do with the basic positive numbers here, I'm going to do negative 1 plus a positive 3. So these are the problems that I want you to work on today. Go ahead and find your answers, submit them in the assignment on Canvas, And then I will want you to do one last thing. When you submit this, I also want you to write a couple sentences describing how, basically telling me how you use this chart to find these answers. So that's your work for today. As always, email me if you have any questions, and we'll be up on Zoom today as well.